this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply.
Are you a solo practice owner considering expanding to group? If so, you should join Master Your CEO Mindset, a 6-month group coaching program that will prepare you not only to be an effective leader, but to build a successful group practice. Sarah Rivera from The Counselor's Mentor and I will facilitate weekly meetings starting July 11th with presentations that cover topics including developing your CEO mindset, hiring and onboarding, promoting clinician retention, marketing, and scaling. You will learn from 2 CEOs who manage thriving group practices, be a part of a supportive community of like-minded peers at the same stage in practice, and get all of the information and accountability you need to take your practice to the next level. For more information, head over to compassionateconsultingcompany.com/FAQ.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. We are kicking off a series on solo practice owners who are considering expanding to group. So what inspired this for me is a program that I have going on right now. It is actually starting in a couple of weeks. So I'm in the preparation stages, but it's Master Your CEO Mindset. So it's taking all of the things that I've learned from my own journey being in a leadership role of my group practice and how to do it successfully, and going back and realizing there were a lot of things that I learned the hard way, and I want to avoid that for other people if I can. So we have our guest here today. We're going to learn about her journey and answer her questions. So Alyssa Castano, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I am excited to learn more. So fill the audience in on your private practice journey and what is leading you to consider expansion.
Yeah, so I feel like probably like many clinicians, I started off in community mental health and then started my private practice part-time once I was fully licensed and able to. And then for the last 3 or so years, I've been full-time private practice. So I specialize in trauma treatment. I'm EMDR certified and a consultant, and I use brain spotting and parts work in my work. My population kind of runs the gambit, but ends up being a lot of BIPOC clients, a lot of queer clients, and then at different, major life transitions where trauma really comes up and rears its head and is like, oh, you want to change your life and like keep moving through life? Let me just make this extra hard. So I've done a lot of work focusing on maternal mental health and also paternal mental health as well. So just wanting to support parents so that way they can be the best parents they want to be in spite of all of the things that they might be bringing in from their childhoods as well. So yeah, nice. I'm excited because I'm finally at the point where I can be a licensure supervisor, and some people are like, well, you can just be a consultant and then you don't have to be responsible for others people's like on your license. And at the same time, I feel like I feel like a lot of responsibility to help clinicians grow and to be the therapists that like our community needs, that our family needs. And so that's kind of I've been interested in it, but I'm also just like, where do you even start?
So it's a very broad question.
Yeah.
But what it sounds like is that you already have a very solid foundation. You have some experience under your belt. It sounds like your solo practice has been very successful. I mean, with 3 years in, I'm sure that you have already had to do some of the work of that transition from just strictly coming from a clinical perspective and now putting that business hat on and understanding some of the accounting piece and obviously ensuring that you're profitable. And then you've had to develop, I'm sure, some systems and processes for your own clients. So the key thing, number one, is making sure that everything that you've got now is able to be duplicated. So do you have that confidence that if you were to bring a team member on and you are onboarding and training, that everything that you're using would kind of pass that test for something that is sufficient for another person to use, whether that be your consent forms, your intake process, all of the paperwork that you use, kind of your systems for assessing and treatment planning and diagnosing and all of those updates. And so I would say that would definitely be a starting point. And so what are your thoughts at this point as far as how you've done in that realm? And
Yeah, it's interesting because as far as duplicating things, I feel like, everything's pretty run of the mill at this point. Like I feel pretty confident in my EHR, and it's probably been mostly word of mouth how my clients end up finding me at this point. And so I don't necessarily have to depend on that kind of marketing in the same way. And I think that is something that does make me nervous because a lot of my clients do want an EMDR therapist. And so I'm like, well, if I'm taking on a new therapist, like if they're not EMDR trained, then I'm like, I still want them to like be either in that realm or heading that realm, or like, I guess, kind of meshing well with my my clinical approach, which I feel like would be easier to teach than like some of the other stuff, because I feel like my way of doing things, of course, is like kind of more intuitive and more like it's proven very like accessible for my clients, and like they keep coming back, and I've been working with the same clients for a long time. So I feel like those kinds of things, being able to train a new clinician on, like that definitely feels like something that is doable at this point.
yeah. Okay, that's good to hear. So it sounds like you are leaning more towards a specialty practice. So is your plan to have really a trauma focus and to ultimately have all of the clinicians have some familiarity or be certified ultimately in EMDR?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I hadn't thought about like what the difference is. And I feel like, yes, probably would be like, and it's funny because to me, trauma doesn't feel like a specialty practice, but at this point, I guess it probably would be because it touches so many different aspects of people's lives. But yeah, I definitely could see myself continuing to focus more and more on like maternal mental health and like maternal trauma. And so having folks who are maybe interested in that area and like that way, because that's also where I also feel most competent, I think, when it comes to like like educating or like guiding somebody on like how to be a clinician. Like I'd probably be pulling a lot on that as well.
Yeah. So some of the other things in addition to that I think are so important to be thinking about in the beginning that you're going to see creep up again later on, for example, are obviously specialty practice versus kind of multi-disciplinary, treat the whole family, because obviously that's going to influence not only your hiring efforts and what you put in your job post and where you post, but it's also going to influence a lot of your marketing efforts. So when you do bring someone on and ensuring that they have that full caseload or that they get full as soon as possible, that you want to make sure that you have that kind of ideal population and that avatar in mind and all of those efforts. And so, yeah, I think that that's also helpful in terms of budgeting. So how much money you need to put aside for those efforts, or is it going to be something that's a little bit more fluid? So are you currently insurance-based or private pay?
So I'm both. I currently use Alma to do my insurance billing because I just was like, I don't want to deal with this. And that's been a lot better than some of the other ones that I've used in the past, of course. And then I do have private pay clients because I do extended EMDR sessions and intensives. And so with those, of course, insurance doesn't want to cover them.
Absolutely. But it's nice to diversify a little bit and not solely be reliant on insurance, but to still be able to offer services that are covered. So that's great. And then another consideration is the type of practice that you want to have and what you envision yourself offering. So where are you geographically for reference?
Yeah, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm licensed in Illinois and Texas.
Okay, awesome. So another thought process would be employee versus contractor. And so I see obviously a very big difference in terms of what that's going to look like in the long term and also what is viable for you. So checking to make sure that kind of what is allowed and what the preference is in each state. But what I have been finding myself in a lot of my own consulting work and in my own practice is that it made a lot more sense for me to have the employee model right out the gate because I really wanted that cohesive, supportive team. I wanted to be able to offer trainings and reimbursement for those trainings, really invest in my team, provide some peer consultation groups, be able to come together, obviously, for team meetings regularly, and eventually be able to offer benefits. Because I was finding that when I was hiring, the pool was really small prior to being able to offer benefits, and it really broadened the scope as far as who was willing to come on board. And then the other consideration is, are you going to be considering those that are maybe newer in their career, kind of midway through, or maybe those that are more seasoned? Because that's also another factor. How much teaching and support and supervision do you want to provide? So what are your thoughts with regards to those things?
Yeah, so I imagine probably like as nerve-wracking as I feel like it could be working with somebody who's like fresh out the gate, I also feel like there's a lot of molding that you can do. And like
Sure.
I think about like myself and some of the really like negative, toxic and burnout experiences I had in community mental health, and to end up in this place, I'm like, well, why did I have to go through all of that to like end
Yeah.
up here? And so to be able to be that for another clinician, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that is definitely where I could see myself going. And then kind of like I heard in grad school at one point, like training my own replacement. So like having somebody who eventually will be able to do the things that I do, and whether they build their own or move on, like I want that. So that way there's that continuity. Um, I think what I've been seeing more and more and talking with clinicians who are 1099s is that like the split is just like it's not sustainable, it's
Mm-hmm.
not transparent, and it does feel unethical in a lot of ways. And so
Hmm.
like in addition to like a lot of people actually setting up the 1099 contracts like illegally, like, and not understanding the difference, I think
Absolutely.
I definitely agree that like starting off with employees out the gate makes the most sense. Um, it's just, yeah,
Yeah, I
getting
think
that.
it's intimidating for a lot of people because there are obviously employment laws that we have to follow and certain things that might be required in your state, like workers' compensation or paid leave that you might need to pay into, and obviously considering taxes and payroll. So, what I would say that I see very often is that a lot of people will start with the contractor model because it seems a little bit less daunting and a way to ease in. And so, obviously, for the majority of states that I'm aware of, you would really need to only be hiring those that are independently licensed and could technically have their own practice if they wanted to. And so you obviously want to be really careful that you're not misclassifying employee versus contractor. And so you have a lot less control in the contractor model, and obviously are not able to offer benefits and can ask that they attend certain things, but can't really require it. So for a lot of people, it can be more comfortable potentially on the one hand because they don't have to consider a lot of the aspects of an employee, and benefits are not always affordable right in the beginning, etc. But on the other hand, the less control can also be a deterrent for a lot of people. So a lot of it is how risk averse somebody is, and how willing to kind of be uncomfortable, like the lesser of the two evils. So always check with your state to make sure that it's even an allowable thing. But I do find that you tend to get in a lot less trouble if you bring on employees, especially for those that are newer in the field, might be new graduates, might be working towards licensure. And it sounds like you are someone who would be very willing to invest if they are the right fit, if maybe they aren't trained in EMDR but interested in it and could potentially shadow some sessions with you with permission, that maybe you could come up with some sort of an agreement in your employment contract that you're willing to contribute to a certain portion of their training. Obviously, making sure you have something in there that if they do leave and they haven't kind of paid that back in some way, that you have an arrangement there to cover yourself. But yeah, it sounds like that could be a potential option too. So yeah, I would say that those are some of the beginning things to start thinking about. And then from there, a lot of it is about the logistics. So are you an in-person or a virtual practice?
So I'm hybrid, and that's kind of one of the more concrete things that I'm like, what do I do? So right now I rent an office in a 3 office suite, and so we
Mhm.
share a waiting room. And finding I'm kind of in this weird place of like, do I try and find an office that's bigger and that is going to cost more so that way I have the space to expand into like
Mhm.
maybe just start with like one person and then see how that goes and then
Sure.
continue growing? Or do I like, because I have interests in like real estate as well. So like,
Nice.
do I try and like go after like an SBA loan so I can buy a building and then like have that be the place that I grow and then maybe
Yeah.
rent out to other wellness practices in the meantime as I'm growing my group practice.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the one of the logistics. Like I think being hybrid is really nice because a lot of people like driving isn't as accessible or there's like chronic pain and all other these other things. And so having the next, like whoever I bring on next, I would probably want kind of that same flexibility without mandating what time.
Sure. So I am a firm believer we can have it all, but not necessarily at the same time. And I think being strategic and a gradual build can be really helpful just to make sure that you've got solid footing and that you are sure that you're on the right track. And a lot of these things are big commitments. So obviously bringing on someone, especially someone full time, a lot of responsibility, a lot of liability. You want to make sure obviously that they are bringing in enough so that they're profitable, that you are able to pay them consistently, work out an arrangement that works as far as schedule and as far as maybe those potential benefits if you go with an employee model. And so the building piece, I feel you would likely, and everybody's situation is different in terms of finances and what they're capable of doing, but a lot of times you'd want to see if this is really working for you and if it lights you up in the ways that you hope it will, because it's an adjustment to have the additional administrative responsibilities. So you already had to adapt to that when you started your own practice, because those things that an administrative assistant might have taken care of or a biller might have taken care of previously, you learn those ropes, you take care of a lot of that, and then you kind of outsource those things like billing that you may not want to do. And so you're going to now have to be responsible for that for an additional person. And so my thought would be slow build. Maybe you hire one, at most 2 people, if you can, ideally at the same time. You credential and train and onboard. Make sure that you have enough clients, obviously, to fill their schedules. Maybe you start a waiting list before you actually post the job to make sure that you have enough to get them going. And then from there, most of the time you can make it work, even if you only have access to one space for an additional person and they work the off hours, and you just be really open and honest about that in the beginning. You might also have the option to do some sort of a subleasing option where somebody else that's in that suite or in that building might not be using their office space all the time and might like the idea, if it's allowed in your lease, to have somebody else using that and paying them for it. And then once you dip your toe in and you've adjusted to the administrative piece and you make sure they have enough clients and you really like being in that position of a leader and a practice owner for more than yourself, then you can also be actively looking for the building and have more capital to obviously contribute to that investment. So that would be my thought. But obviously, you have to do what's best for you, what feels right, what you're comfortable with. And as you start going forward, you will kind of know at each stage what feels right in terms of the next direction, or that's the hope at least. So,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, yeah, because I'm at that point, I feel like in my career where I'm like, what is next? And I'm like, I
yes.
either need to like expand or I need to go back to grad school. And it's like, no, we don't need to go back to grad school.
What would you go back for?
There's a really cool program. It's anthropology and social work, or I think it's like a human services. I can't remember what that. It's up in like Michigan. So I like get the theory of like humans and just all of that wonderful stuff,
Yeah.
and then also look at that because I think there's a lot of really rich traditions that we've lost around like birth and pregnancy, and I feel like the rates of like maternal mental illnesses and all of those things, like I feel like culture is kind of an answer to like that and like reconnecting with our
Yes.
bodies and our families and those kinds of things.
Oh, that's wonderful and fascinating. Yeah, I can definitely appreciate the being pulled in multiple directions. And so, obviously, if you're leaning more towards the expansion at this point, which it sounds like you are, then I think another aspect of it too is really being clear on your mission and values. And we all hear about the importance of your why. And I believe that now more than ever, because I thought that I had that squared away when I was in solo practice, and I really needed to get clear on that when I hired, because I then incorporate that in the interview process, in what I post in the job listing, when I am in meetings with my team and I'm bringing up why something is so important. It's always through that filter. And so really thinking about what the end goal is for you. And this is something you're going to reevaluate at different intervals, and it may change in time. But I know for me, starting the group practice was because I really miss being a part of a team. And I had worked in a hospital and worked in community mental health, and I missed the multi-disciplinary team in that medical model and everybody weighing in and working towards a collective goal. And then in community mental health, it was having that opportunity to come together and talk about cases and a lot of those gray area situations where we know ethically what's right and we know what the law says. But in our profession, there are so many scenarios that there is not this hard or fast black and white, and being able to kind of tease that out with other professionals that get it and are doing the same work and can not only support you, but also provide some guidance. And I had more referrals than I knew what to do with. So in the times that group practice got really tough for me, and I will be honest, there were absolutely those times when I questioned, is this the right move? This is a lot of work. Is it really worthwhile? That's what I came back to. And I reminded myself that it was really isolating when I was solo, and that I'm providing people with a really positive work environment that doesn't have a lot of those characteristics that you were even referencing. And I'm doing it different, and they're getting that support, and they're getting all of those opportunities that I had wished that I had. And so that's another thing that I think is really important to think about for you. What is that driving force behind this decision? And that's something that's going to help sustain you if you're really clear on it as you move forward. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it's kind of funny, but like, those are definitely two of the things, because I'm like, the other suite mates, they're also therapists, but like we never overlap and we don't really talk. And so I'm just like hanging out by myself and like with the clients, of course, but it's just like I miss people and like
Absolutely.
the team aspect for sure. And yeah, and that is the other thing. Like I feel like I'm not able to like work with all the people that are like hitting my wait list at this point, and like I just have too many referrals, which is a great problem, but like I do depth work with my clients, and so we're working together for years, and like I don't want to work with them forever because I believe like breaks are good, but like if I'm averaging 3 years with a client, then I don't have a lot of like space for
turnover. Absolutely. Yeah. And so it does expand your reach in terms of how many people you're able to help. It never feels good to say no, especially if somebody is going through a really tough time, has some type of traumatic experience that they want to work through, really feels like EMDR or brain spotting is going to be something that helps them. And obviously people are becoming more familiar, and the training is becoming hopefully more accessible, but there's still obviously not enough providers, period, let alone those that have that training and that specialty. So it seems like you're onto something. I would definitely also say that for me, another big component was this whole piece of the business side, not necessarily knowing that that was something I was going to enjoy as much. And I would caution anybody out there who's considering group practice, there's got to be at least some part of that you do enjoy, because you can't avoid it. And even if you outsourced and kind of compartmentalized, there's still going to be this managing people aspect. There's still going to be that need to be profitable while maintaining some humanity and compassion for the people that work for you and the clients that you serve. And another big piece for me was I didn't want to be seeing the number of clients that I had been seeing and needed to see to earn a decent living forever. And so I had gotten to a point where I transitioned my caseload, divided it in half, and gave those clients to the 2 first full-time employees that I hired, and was able to take a step back, explore some other things, and be the type of leader I wanted to be. So another thing to think about is, what number feels right for you, and is that something down the line that you might want to shift? And it seems like you have interest in a lot of different things. It's hard to juggle a full caseload, a team, and all of those other things.
Yeah. And I think, that's definitely a good thing to think about because, like, luckily I do, like, I have a great accountant and I've learned a lot of stuff and managed, but it's just like, I do enjoy like the long term, like, okay, what would a whole program look like? What would more groups look like? And kind of having more people to do those things. But yeah, I think like they feel like imaginary numbers, and so it's fun, but like, still we need to make those real. But I think luckily, like in solo practice so far, like my caseload has been very manageable, but like I also am, again, like I feel like I'm not able to serve enough people in my community. And so it's like, how do I make it to where I can? And so.
Yes. Well, you're clearly rooted in some great values, solid foundation like we spoke on, and headed in a very exciting direction. So I hope that you found this helpful. Do you have any final thoughts? And I would love to obviously hear about your practice. And, for those that are listening, if they want to learn more, by all means, fill them in.
Yeah. So, no, I don't think I have any other questions. I feel like you've given me a lot to mull over. I'm really grateful. I'm taking some time off in July, so I'll be able to kind of come back and like, okay, what is this going to look like to start implementing these things? And then as far as people finding me, so I am based in St. Louis. Like I said, I'm licensed in Illinois and Texas. My practice is 3 Circles of Healing, so I can be found at 3circlesofhealing.com, and email in general is the best way to reach me. So Alyssa.Michelle with 2 L's at 3circlesofhealing.com, all spelled out. And then for clinicians, I also do EMDR consultation. And then also for folks who want to integrate birth work with mental health, like that's another area that I consult in as well.
I love it. 3 Circles of Healing. Please explain.
Yeah. So the individual, the family, and then the community.
Mm-hmm. Love it. So you already have the values in the name. A lot of people, that is sometimes the hardest. I know for me, as silly as it sounds, picking the name was one of the most challenging pieces because I couldn't move forward to any other steps until I had it. And I needed something that really resonated and kind of hit me right, and that I was confident that I'd still feel good about down the line. So it seems like you did a great job there.
Yeah, I got lucky when I was like, okay, what do I want like long term? Like I didn't want to use my name, and so 3 Circles of Healing was where I landed.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for being on the show, and I'm going to stay tuned. I am really looking forward to see what happens from here.
All right, thank you.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.